righty. So, a film is a major commitment. A couple of years at least from scripting to press rounds like this one. So, what drew you so powerfully to this story that you were willing to make that kind of commitment to it?
It's true, it is a commitment. And I think I read it like 5 years ago, so it's it's a 5-year process from first reading the novel to being here now and talking about it. And I think it's just when I read the novel, it just hit me on a gut emotional level, and I think that's all I go by, because you have to care so much about a project, and you have to keep caring about it, and keep caring, I suppose, about Charlie really, and that's what it was when I read the novel. What he has to go through, his resilience, his pain, his loneliness, what it says about the world, just really impacted me and made me, was heartbreaking to me, and I kind of felt, okay, I can put years of my life into making this film.
You've copped to your films sharing a preoccupation with, quote-unquote, contemporary loneliness and absence. Is that something you feel you've internalized from modern Western civilization?
Who knows? I just think it's maybe, for me, it's a basic fact of living in the world. I think, for a lot of people, that is what they are dealing with on a fundamental level. Just the nature of existence is that you are alone, and you try and find ways to not be alone, whether that's through relationships, whether it's through religion, whether it's through who you work with or what you do with your life. I think most of us are trying to find things to not be alone, but I think the problem is it's very easy for those things to fall away and us go back to that state of being alone again. So I think for Charlie, for example, as things drop away from his life, family, and he's left with nothing and no money, no stability, it accentuates his aloneness in the world in a really heartbreaking way.
I think you could just as well say, though, that the Weekend and 45 Years and Lean on Pete are also about people doing their best to love and be loved under difficult circumstances, right? For me, what's so touching about Charlie is the way that he cares for this animal, Lean on Pete, this horse, the way he wants to be cared for. Can you talk a bit about that and go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key to me, is exactly how you said it. It's like we all need so much to be loved, like it's so important to all of us, and Charlie needs to be loved and protected and cared for, and here comes this horse who is essentially like him. He's being left, abandoned, no one cares about this horse, and he wants to care for this horse. But I think what's really interesting is, as hard as Charlie tries, he can't always look after that horse, just like his dad couldn't always look after him. Like, life is very difficult for people, and there's only so much compassion that we have in us, I think, and there's only so much we can care for someone. So I found that a really interesting part of the story. It's not about saying the dad is bad, fundamentally, for not being able to be there for Charlie as much as he could. It's just, it's hard for him, He could have tried harder, he doesn't try harder, but he's not necessarily a terrible person. But there's something so sweet about Charlie's kindness.
Yeah.
Under all the stuff that happens to him, he's still kind and he can still care. Yeah. He still has the capability of caring.
They also share this similar proneness, I guess, given that Charlie's 15. What were you like at 15? Did you face any challenges that helped you relate more directly to Charlie?
Yeah, I think I was probably a bit of a mess when I was 15, to be honest. I think there were things in my life, without having to get into those things, that, meant that I didn't feel like I fitted into the world around me, and was, dealing with certain things in my life that weren't always easy. So I kind of certainly felt like that when I read the book and when I wrote the script. You tune into that core feeling of pain that you perhaps carry around with you. That I suppose helped me understand Charlie, to some level, even if my life was very different to Charlie's.
So how did you educate yourself in this place geographically and the racing milieu to the point where you felt ready to navigate it with a production like this?
Yeah, the lucky thing is that the book is so grounded in the reality of that world, and Willie, the writer of the book, lives in Portland. He wrote the whole novel at the racetrack that we actually filmed in, so he knows that world really well. But I went out, I spent a bunch of time with him, and I went and to the backside of the track and met jockeys and trainers and, you know, sat in that cafe in the backside of the track that's in the movie and sat there and had my breakfast and met people. And so you get an idea of the world. And we went to some match races in Burns and in Tillamook and went to all these like places to try and feel the world a little bit. And then I just went driving for 3 or 4 months and just drove around, staying in motels, camped out, like wrote the first draft of the script while I was on the road. And you just try as much as you can just to open your eyes and overhear people talking and watch people and just to try and give it some authenticity as much as you can. Because film is such a strange thing. It's so fake. Like, you set up a shot, it's fake. Everything is fake. So it's about, you know, trying as much as you can to not make it be fake.
Are there specific memories that leap to mind from that research trip you took? Anything concrete that made it into your screenplay?
I think it's just the kind of people that exist in that world, and the fact that wherever you go in America, or it's the same anywhere, it's not any different, but I think in America, because it's so large, it's even more present, is everyone clinging to communities. Whether it's, you know, in a small town in Burns, or whether it's a homeless community in Denver, or whether it's, you know, 2 guys who've just come out of the army in the middle of nowhere, or the racing community, everybody's drawn to each other, clinging on to each other. You know, none of these people are really family in any biological sense. They've created a situation where they feel safe in whatever way that is. And I think traveling around America, you feel that and you see that. You know, and I think it's really interesting because there's a notion in, not just in like the American dream, but it's the same in Europe, of wanting freedom, wanting to like stretch out on your own and achieve your goals, but at the same time we need safety and we need to be looked after, and I feel like you see that everywhere you go.
Yeah. Did you find as you traveled around, or perhaps more so in Portland, that people were testing you or hazing you in order to... You had to sort of woo the author and also the owners of the racetrack, right, to convince them that this Englishman...
There was a lot of wooing, definitely. You do have to woo people to... I mean, like with Willie, I was very glad that Willie had given it to me because, you know, gave me the rights to it. Because I think there's a sense like, can someone that's not from America tell an American story? I disregard that like sentiment because it's funny because I feel like some of the best films I think about Britishness are made by people that are not from Britain. Like if you look at even Merchant Ivory, for example, James Ivory, when he directed his films, he's an American who made films like Howard's End, Room with the View, Remains of the Day, British films made by an American. Paul Thomas Anderson making Phantom Thread, an American doing a film in Britain about Britishness, essentially. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting when I love films about America. You know, John Borman's films that he made in the 70s, a Britishman in America making American movies. I find that really interesting to see another perspective on a culture.
Mm-hmm. The film is, in some ways, kind of low-key Ken Loach. And I say that not because of Kes, although I do wonder if you thought much about Boy and His Animal films of yore, but more so I kind of see that in the matter-of-fact politics of people living hand-to-mouth to various degrees. It's not didactic, but it's unavoidably there. Did you come to any insights about life on the economic fringes?
I mean, Kes is a good example. I mean, I certainly watched Kes again for this film. I think that's, of all of the stories about children and animals, that's probably the best reference for this because it's totally unsentimental. It's a bird that he falls in love with because he needs something to cling onto. You know, and I think, you know, in terms of like what it's like to live, what I understood from looking at people who are living on the fringes economically is that its life is so difficult. Like, if you do not have enough money to feed your family, what are you supposed to do? Like, it's so... And to me, it's always the biggest tragedy of the modern world is that people are suffering so much, you know, that we have so much homelessness, and it exists and it's not just an American problem, clearly. It's the same in the UK, it's the same in France, it's the same everywhere. People are really suffering, and we should be able to stop that suffering, but we seem incapable as nations to stop that suffering. And so for me, it's about just shining a light on that to some degree, you know, realising that kids like Charlie can fall through the cracks so easily and become homeless. So there's a line in the film when he doesn't realise he's homeless, you know, because he's been out in the middle of the desert. It's not like it's homeless out there, but he is homeless, and he's arrived in Denver, and he is homeless, and you know, people can slip into that state very, very easily.
I want to talk a little bit about striking the right tone for this story. You've talked about it being something of a fable in your mind. At a certain point in the movie, I thought this is actually kind of Dickensian in its plotting, on paper anyway. But in style, it's got this anti-melodramatic realism and this unromantic approach. So, can you talk about striking that tone?
Yeah, and it's just finding that balance, isn't it? I knew I didn't want it to be sentimental, but there is like a fable-esque quality to it. It's almost like an old... I studied history at university, and my dissertation was on folk tales, old English folk tales, and they're very grounded in reality. They're very gritty, they're very like authentic, but they still have an element of fable to them. So it's about trying to strike that balance between it not being sentimental, feeling magical is the wrong word, but not feeling so grittily authentic that it's a documentary. So it's just finding that balance and trying to get it right, and it's a day-to-day task. You're like, are we falling in one direction too much? Is it becoming sentimental, but are we giving the audience enough? It's about trying to find that balance.
Can you talk a bit about your working relationship with your actors, what that was like, and if you found that to be fairly consistent or very much adapted to different actors' working styles over the films you've made?
I think it's always about working out what the actor needs. Like, that's the thing. I'm in awe of actors. I think it's so incredible what they do. I could never do it. I'd be the worst actor in the world. And so it's about realising, okay, this actor needs this. And then when you can realise that, you let them do their thing. So some actors want a lot of guidance. Some actors don't need any guidance, and they just need a little bit of help here and there, or they just want you to watch them and tell them if they're doing the right thing or the thing that works for the film. So it always just depends. And you know, the actors on this, I don't think I dealt in any different way than I dealt with in my other films. They're also good. That you just, you know, you're there for them. You create a safe environment. You create an environment around them that feels very real. And I think that helps fundamentally. I don't like too much equipment around. I don't let anybody on the set to stand and watch for the sake of watching. Like, they have to be doing a job, otherwise go and stand somewhere else. I don't like anybody being near my actors when they're trying to work. So yeah, it's just trying those little kind of techniques.
I also want to ask you, the Oscars were last night, and Call Me By Your Name was at the Oscars. Last year, Moonlight won. And I'm just sort of curious where you see gay stories in cinema going. I think there's a lot of kind of controversy because there are so few films that each film has sort of an unbearable burden on it to be everything to everybody. But what are your opinions of...
I mean, I think it's great that more of these films are being made. Like, how can it not be a good thing? Right. So I think it's, you know, I'm amazed that Moonlight won the Oscar, to be honest. I mean, it deserves to have won the Oscar, but I'm amazed that it did. So that's a really good sign that a film like that can win the Oscar, and Call My Name has done really well, and it's definitely much better than it was 10 years ago, although Brokeback Mountain did incredibly well. So I think, you know, it's fantastic these films being made. I'd like more of them to be made about different aspects of sexuality and whatever that means to the filmmaker that's making it. There will always be some of those films that don't break through, and like there was the French film 120 BPM. I can't remember.
Oh right, yeah, BPM,
yeah, which I think has not broken through at all, and I wonder why that didn't. You know, and certain films do. So it's always very, you know, it's a very complicated thing. But I do think that, you know, at least there is a space for these films more now than there used to be.
So, do I have it right that you're working on a limited series?
Yes.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that? It's set in the whaling world,
It's
right?
set in the 1850s whaling trade. So it's about a ship that sets off to Baffin Island, which is northern Canada, and essentially shipwrecks up in the icy wastes of northern Canada.
And with a killer on
with
board.
a killer
right?
on board. So in concept, it feels like totally not anything I've done before, but for me, it makes complete sense. I don't know why that is. I feel like at the heart of that story is what's at the heart of a lot of the films I've done. There is still someone trying to figure out how to exist in the world, I suppose. And so it's definitely a very different backdrop. It's kind of a bit more epic, I suppose, but at the same time it still feels as intimately honest as I hope my other films have tried to do.
All right, well, best of luck with this film and with that project.
Thank you very much. I know. I'm off to the Arctic after this,